Hello, hello, goblins and ghouls. It's about that time of year where these conversations around appropriate and inappropriate Halloween costumes begin to happen. So I thought I'd dedicate some real time to the topic this October. You can hear this full episode via Patreon, but you can certainly also listen to a fair chunk of it via the public preview. Either way, do check it out. A Pakistani-Canadian podcaster and a Mexican-American fashion photographer getting together to discuss cultural appropriation. Where else are you going to find that kind of diverse perspective on seasonally themed content, eh? Certainly not on your average bro podcast. So go on, pour it into your ears. If you're a patron, I'd like to thank you very much for supporting the show. It's because of listeners like you I can even do extra projects like the Polite Conversations Aftershow, where I chat with my patrons and get to know them. It's absolutely wonderful to be able to have these conversations with different people from around the world, different walks of life. I feel so privileged to be able to do these, and I really hope to continue doing them. The podcast really needs more subscribers to keep it a feasible project to even continue. So if you're not yet a patron and you enjoy the show, please do consider becoming one if you'd like to help keep it going. There's lots of extras on Patreon and lots of exclusive subscriber perks, like the new miniseries on the global far right, Woking Up, and the Aftershow. There's lots of good stuff on there. Anywho, back to Halloween. As I've said many times, this fear-mongering around cultural and racial sensitivity being a form of silencing is just the right trying to cling desperately to the ability to do and say racist things without any pushback, and they sure as hell get more and more pushback now, which is a good thing. And I mean, that's not to say that there isn't anything silly being said about Halloween costumes on the left. You don't have to agree with every single thing. I certainly don't. But you also don't have to buy into the right's fear-mongering about wokeness or cancel culture, or that sensitivity to groups and people different from you is a bad thing. That being said, I hope you enjoy mine and Jorge's wide-ranging conversation on cultural appropriation and the topics and characters that often surround it, constantly trying to muddy the waters between some random person or publication saying silly things or genuinely racist and insensitive costumes. I've got a Twitter space on similar heterodox horror stories coming soon too, so it's going to be a really busy, fun-filled time over on the Polite Conversations podcast feed. So enjoy. You were one of my earlier patrons. I appreciate that, when nobody knew who I was.
Oh yeah. I think I only subscribed to you and David Dole, I think. On politics wise. Yeah,
awesome. I am honored.
He did a really good video of Jordan Peterson years ago, and I was like, okay, I need to support this.
He's also Canadian, right?
Yeah. I also need to support the good Canadian political commentators to kind of overrule all of the the other side that you have to condemn, just like they're making Palestinians condemn Hamas every 15 seconds. I'm gonna make you condemn all of the right wing sickos every 15 seconds.
That's fair. No, absolutely. I condemn Jordan Peterson. I can say that without
and
me.
Lawrence Southern and Steven Crowder.
Yeah, and all of them, Lawrence Southern, Crowder, what's his name? Gavin McInnes. There's a lot of them.
He's also Canadian?
Yes.
Okay.
And Lindsay Shepard, do you remember? Jordan Peterson's fan, TA person.
Oh, it barely rings a bell.
Yeah, it was a few years
James
ago.
Lindsay?
James Lindsay is not Canadian, thankfully, as far as I know.
Okay. Lindsay Shepard, that's a woman, right?
Yeah, so she was a TA in some university, and she shared some Jordan Peterson material in class, if I remember correctly. I think this was in 2018 or something.
Yeah, she fell off, right?
Yeah. So she got in some, I don't know, some students complained about it, and then she had an HR meeting, which she recorded.
And she made a grift out of it, every other. Yeah, I remember her from the Rubin Report interview and all that.
Yeah.
I'm just Googling her name again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and then
remember
she
her.
went real quick from, I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson. I was just sharing like a different viewpoint in class to like, there are too many brown babies in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Aftershow. A brand spanking new series. Patreon exclusive. Brought to you by Polite Conversations. This is where I'm hoping to get to know you a little better, dear patrons. This will be the place to come hang out for a casual chat. Let's talk about all things woking up and polite conversations and Twitter spaces and whatever else you'd like to discuss. More content, more conversations, more fun, and even more rationality. All right, welcome to the Aftershow, episode 6. I'll be talking about cultural appropriation with my good Twitter friend and patron, Jorge. How's it going?
Hey, Enya, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, just came back to Texas from a week in New York, so I'm tired, but I'm here.
Is that a culture shock to come back to?
Oh, you know what? Since we're talking about like cultural appropriation and things like that, I things might have changed in Texas, but one thing that I love about New York, at least from my perspective, I mean, just to let your audience know, I am of Mexican descent, or not even Mexican descent. I literally lived in Mexico a little bit less than half of my life. I've been in the U.S. since 2005, and at least at the very beginning of living in Texas, I noticed that whenever I encountered somebody else that that they speak Spanish, either because of they have an accent similar to mine, or you can see like a customer service representative that has a Hispanic sounding name. There is always like an under the table. I don't know how to call it, but like if you try to speak Spanish to someone, you don't know if they're gonna get offended because you tried or because you didn't try. Meaning
we have the same thing in Urdu as well. We have the exact same thing.
Meaning that, oh, are you speaking Spanish to me because you think I don't speak Spanish? Or the opposite is like, oh, if you speak Spanish, why weren't you speaking Spanish to me? And because New York is such a hustle in like every single level, they don't do that between the lines. They will speak Spanish to you at the store, and you'll speak Spanish to them, and it's so nice and just freeing of being able to just do that without like the social, you know what I mean? Without that
without the expectation and the awkwardness.
Yeah, exactly. Without that expectation, and I either start caring less, or maybe people change in Texas. But like I said, at least at the beginning, that's how it felt, and it has improved in Texas. And New York, all that is gone. That there's like none of that expectation, which I like.
Everyone's just too busy.
Yeah, everyone's too busy to care, I guess.
See, in Urdu, so it's always like if they see that your name is kind of like, I don't know, Pakistani sounding, then they'll either try to speak to you in Urdu, but there's always an undertone of like, are you trying to get something out of me? That you're trying to be like, hey, we're from the same country. And so always annoys a lot of people that I know. It's like, no, don't try to pull that. I'm not doing you any extra favors because
okay. Yeah. I guess this is, I guess in Texas you can say that it's like a preemptive defense mechanism against racism. Like, oh, because I have a Spanish name, you expect me to know it. Right? So and then some people will find that offensive. But then, they can also find the opposite offensive of like, what are you trying to hide that you speak Spanish? Why weren't you speaking Spanish to me if you knew that I'm struggling? And yeah, I hate that. It's not something that can be solved. But
yeah, because you're screwed either way. Once in Mexico, I got that where someone was speaking to me in Spanish, and I was like, I don't know how to speak Spanish, and they were very offended. Like,
Yeah,
Like,
I guess it might have been because of that. I mean, if you're brown, if you have
yeah,
like certain skin tone, then they probably expect it. And
yeah,
also
yeah.
because Mexico is such a homogeneous country,
Mm.
they don't. I don't think like it's not normal to expect somebody who might have similar features to just not speak Spanish.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the assumption was that, I was just like forgot about my culture or language, but like no, truly I am not Spanish speaking.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish I did speak Spanish.
I don't know if it's one of the hardest languages to speak, but it's to learn. But it's definitely difficult. A lot of it is made up.
Well, aren't they all?
All languages are, but in terms of like the rules for when you use one letter versus another letter that might sound the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, if somebody like, for example, if one of my American friends wanted me to teach them Spanish, I'm like, dude, I don't know. I just picked it up when I was 1, 2, 3 years old and went with it, and so
Yeah.
that's why it's difficult. The structure, it's not there too much. But I guess you can say that about many languages, including English.
Yeah, I mean, English has some, like now that my son, he's 4, he's learning how to read, and he asks so many questions about like, but mom, I thought you said this letter makes this sound. And I'm like, oh gosh, except not in this time, you know?
Uh-huh.
So like sugar, he'll be like, well, I thought S and H make the sh sound. Why does sugar only start with an S? And it's like, I don't know how to explain.
Yeah, yeah.
But some of the words are like similar to French. I find there are some things that I can kind of vaguely make out because I took French for.
You mean Spanish?
Yeah, and Spanish.
Yeah. Well, they're all Romance languages.
Yeah.
I think Spanish and Italian might be the most similar. Like also in terms of sentence structure, and then I'll say Portuguese is below that, and French might be the least similar. But I guess I could see some words being similar. I know nothing about French.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely some similar words. Like bienvenue is like welcome, and
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's bienvenido in
Yeah.
Spanish.
yeah. So now that we've had a nice little chat about different languages and cultures, let's, 'tis the season for cultural appropriation talk.
Good old cultural appropriation. And when you messaged me, when was it, like a week ago, about this subject, and I know we talked about it in the past, I was afraid that I wouldn't have too much to say about it. And to be honest, I guess spoiler alert is that in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's such a big issue. But then, and we might disagree on this, I think it will be like a good discussion to have. Maybe you'll change my mind, maybe I'll change yours, maybe we agree, I don't know. But then my second thought was that, what do people even mean when they talk about cultural appropriation? I think it's probably, I'm not exaggerating, it might be the worst example of the use of English language in modern political, culture or arena, because it's so vague. I think it might be even worse than the word wokeness, because at least, yeah, because at least you as a conservative, what woke is, and it's just basically anything to the left of your bush is wokeness, and anything I don't like currently is wokeness. But wokeness at least began at the bottom, meaning it wasn't like an academic term. It was Black Americans' way of what do I say it? Like it was a way of saying to be woke was to be aware of the societal issues that afflict them. And understanding them meant to be awake, to not be asleep anymore, rather than maybe like individual choices, that it was like the societal problems that are still affecting them even after many years of all the quote unquote progress that we had. But cultural appropriation, at least from my understanding, it started like as an academic term, and then it went off the rails. It's almost similar to, what was the other one that slips my mind that James Lindsay is obsessed with?
CRT.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you can divide what we mean with cultural appropriation. One could be I guess the organic way in which time, and cultures mix, just because time passes and there's like colonization and just like the natural mixture of cultures. And I think everybody will agree to that, as being good. Oh yeah, and before I continue, so because people have different definitions, I think it lends to a place where people will be either defending or attacking their own idea of what cultural appropriation is, and just throwing those at each other, and like it's a completely different, each person is having a completely different discussion, because I don't think anyone will be against the natural flow of time that causes the cultures to mix, and that's what that's how societies improve in a way. And you can, even going backwards in time, you can learn about history by how languages, we're talking about how like languages and music and art are like influence one another. I think what is that food from Arab origin?
Shawarma.
Yeah, shawarma. It's,
yeah, they have that in Mexico, right? I guess like in some tacos have been.
Yeah, well, in Mexico we made everything into a taco. You stand in one corner long enough and we'll make you into a taco.
But I was watching I think a YouTube video, some travel vlogger, and he was I forget which part of Mexico, but the way that they were slicing the meat from that like rotating big chunk in the middle, that's like 100% a shawarma, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if in Mexico it's all pork. Okay. It might be seasoned differently than shawarma, but the kernel is there of.
But that method of like stacking the different slabs of meat and then slicing it as it rotates around, I think that is probably what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of Spanish words came from Arabic origin. And it was because I think Spain was under Islamic, like, I don't want to say control, but ruling for a few hundred years. I'm not very good in that war history. But yeah, so I don't think anyone will be, against that definition of cultural appropriation. And then you have another, I don't know if we call it definition, but another type, which is basically what Steven Crowder does, which he puts on a sombrero and then starts being racist, or he puts on like something of like Chinese origin type of or Asian type of garments and then starts being racist.
Yeah, that's called like caricaturing. I don't even think you can call it cultural appropriation, really. It's just a racist caricature.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's the problem. That the problem is that Steven Crowder is a racist. He could be wearing nothing, and he will still be spewing the same sort of racism.
Yeah. So let's read out a definition of cultural appropriation first, so that we can structure our conversation.
For sure.
All right. So cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, etc. of one people or society by members of another and typically more dominant people or society. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm looking at the Google like a snapshot of the Britannica dictionary, and here I'm reading: when members of a majority group adopt cultural elements of a minority group, but specifically in an exploitative, disrespectful, or stereotypical way. And yeah, obviously that's a problem. I guess the problem when applying in real life is, does the person mean to be exploitative, disrespectful, or display a negative stereotype? Do they mean harm? In doing so.
And obviously, like, our values evolve with time as well, right? So, like, say what we might have considered an appropriate Halloween costume in 2001 maybe would be super cringe now,
Yeah.
And
the problem there is that, I mean, conservatives in general, I mean, that is literally the definition of being reactionary, where they're for some reason against any sort of change.
Yeah.
they believe that change is like imposed on you. But change also, just like the cultures mixing that happened organically, change in what's it's appropriate or not also happened organically. And their idea of the world is literally impossible because okay, let's go return to tradition, right, with a V.
With
Okay,
a
to
V,
where?
yeah.
Yeah, to where? To 1950s, and then that will be considered modern to some people. So you want to go back to living on caves and undeveloped language? Like it's literally an impossible position to hold. Well, if you try to apply it, to the real world. And I will also go on to say that it's not only an issue when you have the aim of causing harm, but also if you have the power of causing harm. For example, it is much different if a dumbass 17-year-old dresses inappropriate for Halloween than if a public figure does.
Right, or like a college professor or something.
Somebody that has power and influence. So it is different if somebody who's trying to inform the type of immigration policies that somebody like Greg Abbott here in Texas is imposing. That is, almost, I mean, I don't want to overuse the word ethnic cleansing because that's happening right now in Palestine, but it's definitely a race-based form of massive discrimination in the way that these policies are being implemented. And then if somebody like that then does something that is in a vacuum that might not be such a big deal, it becomes a reflection of what they actually think and believe of these minority groups, right?
What policies are you talking about?
Well, not even like policies, but like there's been like changes in like the immigration in the like the at the border. For example, they're putting like these like floating machines that have a sharp circular saw.
Oh God.
Things so that people who are trying to cross literally like hurt themselves. They're putting, I think, pieces of glass at the bottom so that they can't like walk.
Oh my God.
And if there are ever like people that are trying to give water to the migrants crossing, they they put those Americans, like they either give them fines or they put them in jail, or they destroy the little water station areas that the people makeshift to put in. So I mean, those are the ones that are at the top of my head because I wasn't prepared to specifically talk about the border immigration. But yeah, I mean, someone with those type of views about immigration is going to be different, as if somebody like AOC were to wear something that is like Hispanically, like Hispanic looking for Halloween, and even a white Democrat who is for better immigration reform, it will be different. I think the messenger does matter in this.
Right, of course.
Aspect.
So context makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we had that incident where photos of Justin Trudeau were leaked. And those were like so awful for a couple of reasons, right? One was that there was blackface, right? And the other was the turban and the sort of Arabian Night themed kind of Orientalist costume that he was wearing. So it was like twofold horrific. And but what was really interesting, access this brand new Patreon exclusive series by becoming a patron today.